Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. Today we have a guest speaker, and this conversation is one that I think is so deeply important because it's getting us connected deeper with our cycles. So today we have Emily from Moujamoon with us today. Emily is somebody who envisions a world where women are the experts of their bodies and empowered to live beyond the fear of fertility and blood to access their cyclical magic that surges through their system. Emily teaches a holistic reproductive wellness approach through a method called Fertility Awareness Method, also known as FAM, which is a cycle charting framework for deep healing, vibrant health, and it is 99% effective for conscious contraception. She empowers you with accurate information, accessing tools, as well as loving guidance to reconnect you back to your deepest wisdom. And it's the one that she has found that has worked best within herself. Through immersing experiences in person and online, she is paving new pathways and expanding the paradigm of what it means to live vibrant and fulfilled as reverence for the feminine rising again within this collective of women, learning about their wombs and really wanting to have a different experience than perhaps what we've been taught we should be experiencing our period as. So welcome, Emily. I'm so excited to have you here, and I cannot wait to get into this conversation about cycles, about the sacredness of our blood and our cycle, about the phases of life and how our cycle changes. So yay, you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Just even listening to you do that little intro, I'm like, yeah, I just would love nothing more than to spend my time talking about this. So I love that it's recorded and other people get to listen to this conversation we're going to have.
Oh, and I think it's such an important one because, like, I always say this, and I know for myself, this was my experience. And I think majority of us, unless if we had a really forward-thinking mother, also lived this kind of experience of dreading our period, of wishing that menopause would just come so we would never have to experience this again, and really feeling like we're missing a whole part of our life. Like, so many women I work with are always just like, why didn't I know about this sooner? Like, this changes everything. And I think that's what's really drove me to be passionate about this. What do you think has been your guiding force or your catalyst to get you into wanting to teach this and wanting to bring women on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a long journey that it's actually quite difficult to pinpoint the beginning or to really be able to narrow in on that one specific moment or that one specific thing. But really zooming out, I think like a lot of women just being raised in a patriarchal society, I was much more concerned with how I looked, with how I could please others, with what I needed to do to kind of manipulate myself, my personality, my appearance to secure love and belonging. And as time went on, that was not working for me. I was not finding that love and belonging that I was looking for. And, along that journey, I really also felt the pressures in my mid 20s of, well, I'm supposed to, have a baby in a few years, meaning I'm supposed to fall in love soon. So I should have already met him. And this whole kind of external orientation of trying to move down these conventional choices with life that were supposed to give me fulfillment, and it just was not going my way. And so, what I did is I basically packed up my life and pulled a little eat, pray, love and left my job teaching elementary school. And I got a job teaching English in Morocco, and I booked a one-way ticket, and I had absolutely no clue what was in store for me. But I knew that the way I was living my life wasn't working for me. I knew that I was burnt out, and I didn't have this language at the time. Probably my language would have been I'm seeking adventure, but now I could say I was lost. I was disconnected from myself. I had zero sense of intuition. I had zero connection to this. I shouldn't say zero. but a very limited amount of connection to this inner guidance, not only as a result of the general way that society kind of pressures all of us into this linear way of existence, but also just from a religious upbringing that also taught a lot of shame around bodies and a lot of fear around sexuality, and essentially absolutely zero mention of menstruation. I grew up in a house where there was zero touch point of education or communication or support around menstruation, other than, oh, you got your period for the first time, here's a super size, warehouse box of pads that my mom bought for me from Superstore, and there you go, you're well on your way, let me know when you need more. That was the start and the end of it.
Yeah.
So I moved to Morocco, and essentially I had no clue what was in store for me, but I ended up staying for 4 years. And it was during that time that I was still on that track of, why isn't life going my way? I wish I could fall in love. I wish I could finally have this purpose and meaning as a mother. And that led me to wonder about my fertility and wonder about my cycle health. And I was having a lot of skin issues, a lot of intense eczema. Someone suggested to me, I wonder if it's hormonal. And so that kind of led me just to purchase a book. And that book was called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And that book was suddenly this rabbit hole. Within the first few pages, I was just like ravenously angry, highlighting everything, circling, going, calling on my yoga community at the yoga studio that I practiced at, like, oh my goodness, does anybody else know about womb power? Does anybody else know that you're actually always on your cycle? It's not that you're only on your cycle when you're bleeding. And that led me to start listening to some podcasts about fertility awareness method, find out a little bit more about it just as an observer. And I felt probably the most massive tornado of inspiration kind of roll its way through my life, as I realized that all of these different segments that I've always been passionate about and skilled at, women's rights, education, connecting to our body, everything kind of came together in this beautiful web of, wow, fertility awareness method as a charting practice of our fertile signs really pulls all of those things together. So I learned the method myself, and I turned around and extremely quickly started offering just general women's circles at a local yoga studio in Morocco, just guiding women to understand the 4 seasons of their cycle, how to live in sync with their cycle, how to connect to the different archetypes of their cycle, these different aspects of themselves. And essentially, I would say that connecting to my cycle was my own initiation into actually becoming a grown ass woman, into actually becoming the main character of her life, and realizing that she has agency and power and autonomy to actually make choices and decisions to direct her life from the inside out, and to cultivate love from the inside out, right? And to actually source
Yes.
what it is I needed from the inside out, and really pull that life force energy up from the ground, up from the earth, into my womb, through my heart, out of my voice, and find out that, this internal orientation of life works much better for me than that external orientation of 22-year-old Emily a couple decades ago. So
Well, and it's funny that you say that, because the first thing that comes to my mind listening to you, and this is my part of my experience, was that learning about my body and learning about FAM was this way, or fertility awareness method. Sorry, the acronym. But it was the first time that I felt empowered in my own body, right? Like, it was like, before it was, you just go on birth control and it's going to solve your problems. And then there was this method that was like, I don't have, because even when you're on the pill, you still wonder, did I take it at the right time? Did I forget? Oh no, I forgot. Like, there's still so much panic. You feel out of control, out of your body. You feel like you are somebody outside of this vessel that you're living in. And I think the experience, when I experienced FAM, and then when I started playing with it and when I started diving deeper, was that I started realizing how much power I had and how much I felt empowered by knowing about my cycle and knowing how to move within my cycle. And it blew my mind how much information. I really got angry that we weren't told this
Ah,
information earlier.
ah. And I
Like
mean,
how?
yeah, and like if you think about it, like what it feels like to like just put a hand on your belly and to place a palm on, your womb and to just think of this part of the body and how we're shamed for having a round belly, we're shamed for having a soft belly, like, oh, it better be hard, it better be small, there better,
Mhm.
have absolutely nothing going on there, and how, that really takes us out of just this relaxed way of being able to like drop our weight into our hips while we're sitting and be able to take a big full belly breath, and the way that just being able to really ground and root into that physical space of our body that is this center of creativity, the center of sexual energy, the center of self-expression, right? I'm using all of this
Yes.
language that describes the sacral chakra, and how, um, to be at war with that part of our body does not bode well for us. And really, the best our society offers typically is just a neutral ignorance, right? At worst, you hate it. At best, you're like, oh, it doesn't cause me too many problems,
Hmm.
right? But then there's this whole other way to be, which I think is what you're talking about when it inspires such a deep, profound sense of confidence of, wow, this part of myself that I was taught to be the most ashamed of is in fact where so much of my personal power is waiting for
Yes.
me.
Yes, exactly. So much of our personal power is there. And it's I think you nailed it there when you were just saying like that society has set us up to really not be in touch or to be in connection with that power. And that's a whole nother source of like deep inner womb wisdom that I think comes from understanding our phases and being able to live in sync with them. I know that you use FAM or that you coach FAM
Mhm.
with helping women to really connect to their periods and to use not just the biomarkers, but this connection to practice deeper into preparing for larger life experiences like pregnancy, birth, perimenopause, menopause. Can you go a little bit deeper into this idea of connecting our periods for these larger experiences?
Yeah, well, what I really envision is this beautiful world where, teenagers are being taught this information at this basic level when they go through menarche, when they have their first bleed, as they're cycling through that first handful of years. And the reason why this information about the way our body works, fertility awareness methods showing us that, is so important is because we can expect irregular cycles for the first, up to 10 years of bleeding. So it takes approximately 10 years, some people say 12 years, for that connection between our brain and our ovaries to really settle into a stable relationship. Meaning that if your daughter is having cycles that are, 22 days, 45 days, 28 days, followed by another one that's, 35 days. Actually, nothing necessarily is quote unquote wrong. She actually doesn't need to take a birth control pill to quote unquote regulate her cycle to some perfect 28-day idea. Because if she takes the pill, then she's not ovulating, nothing has been regulated. So we'd rather have irregular cycles where your teenage daughter is ovulating a little less regularly than to have her not ovulating at all and to be having her fake monthly pill withdrawal bleed. So, really, by being able to have this information sit with us at the beginning of our fertile journey, we already start to give ourselves so much more grace and have so much more understanding that irregular cycles are not always the end of the world. And while our menstrual cycle is our fifth vital sign, and we love to see a rhythmic flow of a cycle being about ish a month, it's okay if it's a little bit shorter. It's okay if it's a little bit longer. It's okay if your cycle changes by a few days every month. Even up to 7-day changes is not something to be alarmist over. I always encourage meet your body with curiosity rather than concern, wonder over worry.
Mhm.
And yet, if we have that information and we can really practice that from the very beginning, we're then able to connect to our body, whether we're having a more rhythmic, regular cycle that's about a month. And we're also able to then also fully understand what's happening in our body when we have irregular cycles. And for those that are unfamiliar with fertility awareness method, we track our tangible fertile signs. So we love to note down in our chart the intangible. Oh, higher energy today, lower energy this day, breast tenderness, high libido. We love to track all of that. Those are the intangible subtle signs. But with FAM, we're tracking the tangible. When you make the cervical mucus that comes out of your yoni that tells you you're fertile, when your basal body temperature shifts and tells you absolutely that you're in your luteal phase, right? So we're tracking these tangible signs. So, if we really are able to develop that skill of cycle tracking, even if we have, we're on cycle day 40 and our period is nowhere to be found, we can still have a sense of, oh, well, I'm not really stressed or worried or concerned I might be pregnant. I can see I haven't even ovulated yet, right? I can
Hmm.
see that I'm actually still at least a couple weeks out of my bleed because ovulation hasn't even occurred yet. I can know if I'm on cycle day 40 and I haven't gotten my period yet that I'm having an irregular cycle. I can reflect on what's going on in my life and my health right now, as well as the last 3 cycles, and be able to maybe piece together why that might be without being stressed, just rather from observing and learning about myself and learning about my body and learning what it has to show me about my health and vitality and my wellness and my lifestyle and my choices, what I want to accept, what I want to change.
Yes.
And, the bigger thing is just also remembering that sometimes irregular cycles are a message from our body of, ooh, we want to shift something in the way we're living. And other times it's to be expected, like when we're postpartum, when we're a teenager, when we come off of hormonal birth control, when we're going through perimenopause. So if we can really master the skill of charting our cycle for healing, for health, for avoiding pregnancy in a way that's reliable, for achieving pregnancy in a way that's easeful, we find out, oh, wow, I haven't only learned fertility awareness method just for my short-term reproductive goals. I've actually mastered this lifelong skill that is here to support me from my very first bleed to my very last as this gorgeous, intimate record keeper of what is going on with my cycle and my womb and my body and my hormones through all of these bigger passageways where irregular cycles can be expected. So let's befriend them. Let's
Yes.
not worry so much if we're not ovulating with the full moon and bleeding with the new moon. Oh, I freaking love it when that happens. But it's okay if things are showing up in a little bit more of a unique pattern.
I love that. And I know that I don't know how deep we want to go into this conversation, but recently in the past few months, I've had a lot of people coming to me with PCOS because of their irregular cycles. And they're really drawn to this idea of wanting to learn more about their cycle, wanting to understand like
Hmm.
when to panic, when not. So
Hmm.
can we touch a little bit, because I know that we've dived a little bit into irregular cycles here with the idea of postpartum, of teenage years, and of perimenopause. But what would be, and we like what you wish to share here, right?
Yeah, for
Of
sure.
how much you wish to share of when it comes to irregular cycles, what would be something that you would provide as like comfort words or
Hmm.
comfort food for
Hmm.
somebody who is experiencing it for whatever it might be, whether it's PCOS
Yeah.
or whether it is something else? Because PCOS, there's a lot of other things that we can do, but
Yes.
the panic that comes in, I think sometimes when we're in our middle years and we feel like we should have a regular cycle. You touched on one thing, coming off birth control definitely can affect that. So if we've been on it, especially for a long time, it's been masking a bigger issue. So, but what would be your little tidbit, I guess, that you would like to
Yeah,
offer?
of course. Well, I myself have irregular cycles. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And for those of you that probably don't know, that's a autoimmune version of hypothyroidism. So That's one reason why people would have irregular cycles. Anything related to their thyroid health, as you said, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Other things could be amenorrhea. So there's just kind of this, pause of ovulation and the body's not ovulating for whatever reason. Typically with amenorrhea, it often is over exercise and under nutrition, although obviously it can be more complicated with that coming off of birth control. Pregnancy lost, whether it's spontaneous in the form of a miscarriage, whether it's intentional in the form of an abortion, and full birth of a living, beautiful baby. These are all different things. And this is not an exclusive list. There's so many more beyond that that could create an irregular cycle for a certain amount of time. And so I really think that the what you said, what words can I provide for someone is, I think that such a big part of the letting go of the stress around the whole thing is always, firstly, do you know what's happening? Like, do you understand the terms follicular and luteal? And do you know that an irregular cycle just means that you're having a longer follicular phase, right? Reminder to everybody that, we have the first day of bleeding, that's menstruation. And then we have that follicular phase from that first day of bleeding up until we ovulate, and then after we ovulate, we have that luteal phase that's about 2-ish weeks. So even just that piece of information provides so much comfort for women. Like I said, when you're on that cycle day 40, where the hell is my period? And you can go look back in your chart and you say, well, I'm actually still follicular. Like, I'm not even close to bleeding yet. So really, firstly, just understanding the way your body works evaporates so much of that, what the hell is going on? And I feel like a majority of the stress lives in the what the hell is going on. And then once we are charting and we know how our body works, that in itself will not or may not miraculously balance your hormones, but it is that foundational support tool so that as you call on your healthcare team, working with your naturopath, working with your Reiki practitioner, maybe working with your allopathic normal Western doctor, whoever it is, your acupuncturist, as you call on these people who are going to be able to better support you in, well, let's run some blood work and actually find out what's going on. If you're in your middle reproductive years and you're not postpartum, you didn't just lose or end a pregnancy. We know that that's not the reason why you're having irregular cycles. So what the heck is going on over here? I always really advocate for all of my clients this holistic approach, which includes go get your blood work done, find out what's going on, because the healing path for PCOS and the healing path for Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism are completely different. The foods you're going to want to embrace for balancing your hormones with one of them are going to be very different than the foods you're going to want to embrace or even avoid with one of the others. So it's not always beneficial to just be Googling and to try to necessarily self-diagnose, because you could end up taking an iodine supplement just from a quick Google search, and that could actually be the worst thing for you, depending on what is happening in your body. So I really think that the charting is this self-monitoring tool of your hormonal health, so that as you embark on your healing journey, you're able to reflect and see, how are the exercises I'm doing, the food that I'm bringing into my life to nourish me, the acupuncture I'm doing, the supplements I'm trying, how are all of these things actually showing up with changes in my chart? So you can use that as this supportive, grounded compass to kind of bring yourself back, like we said, to this personal power, that you actually have agency here to shift what is happening in your cycle and to shift what is happening in your body. And I mean, so much of the work I do, similar to you, is let's look at the science, let's learn about the science of our body. But then, like in my group program, let's also now drop into a sacred meditation where we can just remember to give ourselves so much grace that we are all doing the best we can. We live in this really toxic world. And it's pretty impossible to be, perfect when it comes to our health and to our wellness. And so, can we just tune in and also let our irregular cycles take us on this deep, energetic, spiritual journey of what it is that our womb wants to heal, what it is that our womb wants to feel, that our womb wants to release on all of these more subtle energetic levels that also just remind us of the brilliant spiraling path of the womb, that we don't always know where we're going. We don't always know what the outcome is going to be, but can we learn to feel with it? Can we learn to be with it, to sit with it, and to feel it just with so much love and acceptance while we're going through it? And baby girl, I say all of this as someone who has been there. I am not someone teaching you who is 25 years old living in Bali, telling you how to, just like live a perfect, healthy life. Like, let's talk to her in 15 years when she's also gone through some shit. So,
Yes.
that's really where I'm teaching from, is I have gone through it, right? I have gone
Mm.
through it. And I often reflect and think, oh my goodness gracious, I do not know how I could have gone through all of this if it had not been for Emily in her mid 20s that discovered fertility awareness method and started charting her cycle and knew how her body worked before things started to shift, and she could go, I have all the tools around me to support me through this.
Mhm. It's so true. It's that time again. It's Black Friday. I am so excited for the 5 days of 5 different deals that I am going to be offering this Black Friday. If you want a sneak peek at what's going to be offered and be one of the first people to access these deals, you're going to want to get on my Black Friday VIP list. The link to get on the list is in the show notes below. By signing up, not only will you receive an email a week before Black Friday listing all the deals, but you will also have access to purchase each and every one of them in that email. So this is something that you're not going to want to miss out on. So go to the show notes, click on the link, and get on the VIP list today. I often think about, because like I have 3 kids and they're all young, and I'm also in my 40s. So like I read in this great book called The Female Brain by Dr. Luann Bresendine, how she writes a lot of girls are starting to hit puberty when their moms are in perimenopause and entering menopause, and how like these are 2 big chaotic shifts in one's life. Or like big shifts. I shouldn't say chaotic, but big shifts that bring a lot of stuff. And so like I'm in perimenopause and I have young kids. I do not know how I would function without, like, I could seriously see how I could burn a lot of relationships and potentially be the complete opposite of a parent that I would want to be by not knowing what I know now. Because when you are feeling these fluctuations, when you're not caring for yourself because you're caring for everybody else, it is so easy to feel like life is happening to you versus being like, well, I'm in my luteal phase and I need to go to my bedroom and be left alone with no one talking to me, nobody touching me.
Yeah.
Just want personal space. But like it has been a game changer in my marriage of being able to really communicate and for him to understand when I say, I'm here, you know the rules of this phase.
Yes.
You know what version of Kate you are getting today because I am in this season. Yes. And so it's so mind-blowing. Like even 2 days ago, he was touchy and needy, and I was like, dude, like I am in my own little personal box here. Like this is a no-go zone. I just don't want any of it. I don't want hugs. And it's so amazing of me now knowing my irritations and what it is about and how to nourish myself, of how to ask for what I need. And I think for women, that's a hard one, is asking for what we need, because we're not taught that we're supposed to have needs or to ask for those things or expect them. I think expect is the biggest one. And I expect them because I know my body and I know that if you give me this space, I will be a better version in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're speaking to, I think, is so much of the healing power of cyclical living that, like I said earlier, where I was like, well, charting your cycle may not actually necessarily be the only thing you have to do to really heal your entire experience with your womb. There's so many other aspects to it. And yet, I see time and time again in my group program, and I take no credit for it. I am humble here. I give credit to the women I teach, where we're moving through the work, and we're learning what we're learning, and we're doing the meditations that we're dropping into, and they're coming and they're sharing, yeah, like I just had the most easeful period of my life. Like my period cramps are gone 3 months into learning with you, Emily. And it's not even necessarily because we really maybe directly touched specifically on that, but it's because of this subtle intuitive shift that happens when you go, I'm charting my cycle, I'm tracking my mucus, I'm taking my basal body temperature. I know I'm luteal. Maybe they're living still a little bit from the neck up at the beginning of their journey and not from the neck down. So seeing the temperature patterns on the chart and knowing from the temperature patterns on the chart that they are now in their luteal phase, and it's that precious time to slow down and take the quiet time and find some space, so they can just lean into that a little bit more, right? Even if they're not necessarily living neck down yet and they don't really fully embody that or feel the shift and can identify it yet from this more intuitive felt place. You see it, so you start leaning into it. And then just that is enough for your body to say, ooh, let's just slow our roll on that cortisol. Let's give ourselves a little bit more of a chance to convert some of that pregnenolone into that progesterone. And now we're feeling all relaxed and grounded. And, we've taken those magnesium salt baths that Emily recommended I take when I see high temperatures. And then, wow, my period was just a little simpler this month. And that just sets you up now for a smoother beginning into that follicular phase. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful journey to really see the way that even just the subtle basic teachings of all of this holds an incredibly transformative power in the way that people experience their cycle, that this really can actually shift the real grounded health of your hormones.
Yes.
Right? And how it is all actually, moving and surging through your system.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you are also a mind body practitioner. You're like a yoga practitioner as well. And when I was doing my yoga therapy, I thought this was so fascinating because once again, I was curious about the female body. So everything that I was learning about whatever, I always brought it back to the female body. I was like, how does this information play into what's happening in my cycle? But when I was learning about pain science and chronic pain science in particular, one of my big light bulbs that came off was the fact that our body, it wants to protect us. Like it has a memory of pain. And so it has already wrote our story. And so sometimes we're not even experiencing that level of pain that we had a year ago, but instead it's still telling us that. So we already have anxiety in our luteal phase of going, okay, I'm going to have a painful period. It's going to be bad. Like I'm 2 days away. Like we put ourselves in this position emotionally with our mind and our mind body connection that we start to prepare for something. And we already start to create that contraction that when the pain comes, it might not even be that depth of pain, but our body's almost making it feel that way because it wants to keep us safe. It doesn't want us to harm. And what we forget about pain science is pain is not a realistic gauge of what's happening in the body. It is just our body's way, our nervous system's way of saying, hey, dude, you got to stop what you're doing because you're going to cause injury, right? Yeah. So like it signals a flare up in the world saying, alert, 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 because I don't want you to hurt yourself and you may go there. And when we look at that with our period, that alert, alert, alert in my mind is us going, if you don't rest, you're not going to have a good cycle next month. So like, can you so I sometimes feel like our menstrual pain, as much as we give it like this bad label, we forget about the beauty behind it of that. Is this our body's way of saying you're pushing too hard, you're not resting enough, and you're not putting yourself first? And
Mm.
this is your downtime. This is your inner winter. Like, let's just take care of us, and
Yeah.
everything else will be fine. See
Hmm.
how that lands in our body. And I just sometimes think that we get so caught up
Hmm.
in what the story we've been telling ourselves, or the story that we've been fed. And we see the really amazing example of this is menopause. Like,
Hmm.
how many people are worried about menopause when they're so far away from menopause?
Yes.
And so we're setting the stage of creating this experience of hating it, of dreading it.
Yeah.
And yet it can be such a beautiful, like, there's so much beauty and symbolism, and I don't know, so many great takeaways from
Oh, for
all of these
sure.
magical shifts in our body.
Yeah, and just even hearing you talk about that, I think about even my own experiences with menstruation, because I have very heavy, very powerful bleeds, and my friends always joke that they're like, "Well, of course you do. Like you're Emily of Moujamoon. Like, what are you gonna have like a 2 day scant light flow? Like, of course you have a week of just like being in the house and free bleeding as it drips down your leg and like collecting it all for the plants. Like, of course, it's kind of a big deal around here when I have my irregular bleed.
Yes.
It's not just a little light ant flow comes to town. It's just like Goddess Callie is in the house for a week with us, just kind of ripping her way through whatever
Yeah.
needs to be let go of, right? Whatever needs to be released. And such a big, big, deep passion of mine is us really understanding that our monthly menstruation is also preparation for these bigger womb passages. And if we are entering the days before menstruation disconnected from our inner wild woman, shaming ourselves for the spicier emotions that we're shaming, lashing out immaturely with no kind of emotional awareness or mastery, and we just want this time to be over, and then we're bleeding, and the whole thing is just this, yeah, as we talked about, awful curse that we have to deal with every single month as a woman. Oh my God, let me just go get an IUD. Then we're not only missing the emotional holistic benefits of learning to breathe down into our pelvis, breathe down into our yoni, breathe through some intense experiences in bleeding, then we're also surprised that women are terrified of labor, right? That women are terrified of these bigger passageways where our body is doing the same thing. And what I wish everyone understood is that whether it's menstruation, miscarriage, abortion, live birth, the body does the same thing in all of those womb releases, which is your cervix retreats, softens, and opens, and your uterus contracts.
Mhm.
And it's the same experience anytime the womb is releasing its contents, irregardless of when or what those womb contents are. It's the exact same physiological process. So every single time that we can consciously menstruate, that we can consciously slow down in our luteal phase, it's not only just for that bleed, but it's also then that we are honing the skill for when we're deep, deep 9 months into a luteal phase pregnancy, right? 9 months into an inner fall, into an inner winter, preparing for a whole month for when our womb is also going to spontaneously start releasing a baby, right? And when we're able to consciously sit with menstruation, and as we said, relax, prepare, get support, communicate our needs, create our safe cave, and give ourselves the space to actually release what is coming through with breath, with audible sighs, then we are also preparing resilience and vitality for our body when it is time to go through labor, right? So really what I hear you saying when we talk about this resentment, and that we can have a totally different experience, every month we can birth a new self, right?
Mhm.
Every cycle we can let go of what happened and actually move into this laboring experience of our period to have a deep transformative medicine journey of what is coming out with our blood and then planting seeds for that new cycle ahead. So
Mhm.
that's really what I wish everyone could understand is the more we create a relationship with our womb consciously every day, every month, every cycle, the more we're preparing ourselves for all of these bigger passageways, like we said, birth, pregnancy loss, and also menopause, right?
Mhm.
More you can sit with yourself in the deep luteal phase, those PMS days, that's going to be the main theme of the arc of your life in those perimenopausal years, right? It's a large transit, a large passageway of sitting with that wild wound that's letting all of it go, right? And is
Yes.
preparing to burn it all away as she moves into her crondom, which is represented by menstruation. So I just always love the image and the ideas that our cycles are always happening on all of these different levels of life, from the macro of a breath in and a breath out to the monthly cycle of our womb to this age, I mean, age long, to this
Yeah.
lifelong cycle of the young maiden, the mother, the
Yes.
wild woman, the crone, right? Every time we
Yes.
can cycle, we prepare for it.
Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And I think just for everybody that's listening, if you have a teen in your life, or if you have a sister who is a mother, like you've got
Hmm.
to replay this last little bit about the importance of period. I think this, my personal opinion is this is the key that's going to transform
Hmm.
our youth. Like
Hmm.
there is, I always say this, and it's not evidence-based. It's just Kate's personal belief. But I truly believe that the more we get to tap or help teens tap into this idea of resting during their bleed, of caring for themselves during that luteal phase, and to really break the rules that we have to keep showing up the same. If we
Yes.
can do this in their teen years,
Yes.
I 100% believe this is what's going to fix teen depression, that this is going to reduce teen suicide rates, and that this will potentially reduce teen pregnancies
Hmm.
because you're giving girls this power of
Hmm.
understanding themselves and asking for, and not even asking, demanding for what they need, of going, I don't care that it is the grade 12 final for language
Yeah.
arts. I'm
Yeah.
on day one of my cycle. There's no way I can public speak. Like,
Yeah.
I think that when we start to break these rules and set new expectations for all of these bigger
Hmm.
systems outside of ourselves and say, no, I don't operate within you. You've got to include me with where I'm at. And there's got to be flexibility. That's when we're going to change everything. Like, I just think you're setting up the world for a much more healthier,
Yeah.
much more productive world when we teach
Hmm.
girls to rest when they're bleeding. So,
Yeah, for sure. And it brings up that whole common shame around, once again, all womb releases, whether you're bleeding,
mm,
ending an early pregnancy, giving birth, it's the same thing. We don't want to see it. We don't want to hear about it. Don't talk to your coworkers about it. Don't tell anyone about your abortion or your miscarriage. That's a secret just for yourself to keep in shame for the rest of your life. We don't want to hear about the way that your vagina got all stretched out in labor. It's just this constant, like, hatred of any time the womb releases anything. So when we
yes.
also start speaking about our bleed, that I feel is the starting point to also begin to neutralize and accept all of these other very common things that
Mm-hmm.
women are going through. Where if you can just say to your coworkers, how are you doing this morning? Yeah, I'm good. What about you? I'm quite tired. I started my period last night, so I'm feeling a little bit lower energy, but I'm just going to be quietly at my cubicle today. right?
Yeah.
And then the way that you might even be surprised that that coworker is going to drop by after lunch with a little beautiful organic dark chocolate bar with you. And we
Mhm.
find out that support is actually there for us if we can speak up. And I mean, so much of me going on this journey is also finding out that men were not nearly as resistant to understanding our cycles and to learning about my cycle and supporting me in my cycle as I thought they would be, because so much of this is internalized patriarchal shame. For a long time, I wondered, where did it come from? I don't remember always a distinct moment or a distinct lesson I was given, but it's because it's all of this insidious general shame and secrecy in our society and culture that women are not to blame for, but we cooperate in every time someone asks us, and our truth is to tell them what's really going on in our body, and we keep it a secret. How are you
Yes.
doing? Not good. I had a miscarriage 2 weeks ago. I need your help, right?
Yes.
The more we can neutralize and really speak about what's going on with our body, the more support comes in, the more love we receive. And the more we all just really start to come together to honor what you're talking about, to honor our blood, to restore
Mhm.
reverence to our blood, regardless of the day, time, or reason that arrives, as we just show up for women during that time. And once again, this prepares us for that huge passageway of birth and postpartum, right? How
Mhm.
much can you rest and receive and say no during postpartum? How much can you really just let what your body did be enough?
Yeah.
One of my favorite mantras for the end of my luteal phase and the start of my bleed is I am enough. I've done enough. I have nothing to prove. And I repeat that again and again. I am enough. I've done enough. I have nothing to prove. And imagine once again, if your teenage daughters had that felt sense as they walk through the world, I am enough. I have nothing to prove. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Well, we're at our time. My gosh, time flies here. But before I let you go, I always like to end these calls with a womb-led tip for our audience. So
Mm.
would you have a womb-led tip that you would like to share with everybody listening today?
Yeah, for sure. Ooh, I don't even know where to start or where to begin.
I know. It's like, one, can I just release a
I
book?
know. The one that comes up to me, the one that comes up for me instantly is drink a lot of broths, make yourself broths. One of my favorite tips with cyclical living and really living in sync with my cycle is use your inner ovulatory energy, all of that beautiful, abundant inspiration and energy that you feel around the days that you're ovulating. Use that energy to be the superwoman that goes and makes the broth and makes the soup for your PMSing self. So that when you come to those deep days in your luteal phase and you're expecting your bleed, you may not have the time or energy then to cook and then be like, I got the broths from day 14, Emily. Thank you so much. So that would be my
Yes.
tip. That would be my tip, is use that ovulatory energy to really take care of yourself ahead of time for when your bleed is going to arrive.
I love it. I love it. That's a really great tip. All right. So everybody, if you want to learn more about Emily's offerings, how you can follow her on Instagram, all of her links are in the show note below. You'll definitely want to go check out her feed. It's amazing. Is there any last little thing that you want to share, Emily? I know that you mentioned that you have a course and you do circles.
Yeah, for sure. What I'll just mention really quickly is I've obviously loved the topic and theme of today's talk, and I will say clearly for everybody, my main focus is conscious contraception. So what I'm really
Ah,
passionate about teaching people is how to chart their cycles to avoid pregnancy, which we didn't touch on today very much, which is okay. It's so nice to not repeat yourself endlessly with the same stuff on every interview. But for anyone listening who just feels like birth control is not a fit for them, but they really feel like they're still in that phase of life that they're wanting to avoid pregnancy, I am your gal. I've got a free mini course on my website for everybody that wants to have that start of avoiding pregnancy with confidence and ease while maintaining this beautiful connection that you're deepening with your womb cycle.
love it. So the links to all of that will be in the show notes below. Thank you so much, Emily, for being here. This has been a really great conversation, and I have enjoyed it so much. We may have to do a part 2 on this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. It was such an honor to be here.
Are you excited about aligning to your cycle? If so, make sure that you subscribe to this podcast and like the episode if it really resonated with you. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living.